Hello, everyone. I did not take as much care of my physical appearance as I normally do, which is saying something because I very rarely take any care for my physical appearance at all. The subject for this episode has actually been kind of a little bit stressful for me. Panic is absolutely central to some of the more severe aspects of my struggles with mental health. My panic attacks really started years ago at work. And, honestly, maybe I kind of liked what I did last week where I did a little bit of a personal update. It's kind of an interesting thing to do, but I've been doing pretty well. How are y'all? I'm exhausted, absolutely exhausted. Just every small, mundane things take a lot out of me these days. And part of it could be anxiety. I have actually been pretty stressed about this episode, and it's something that's I've lost a little bit of sleep over. I'm also very diabetic. I'm talking like blood, like molasses blood diabetic right now. So that's probably also really contributing to the physical just yuck that I'm dealing with, and also has a tendency to be compounded in the mental health sphere. But let's just jump right into it. So my panic attacks have been really started at work. I had some situations where I had coworkers who would get very, very, very angry. And that anger would show. And anger is something that's really hard for me to deal with, coming from other people. One of the things my therapist used to always tell me is, like, if you're walking down the street and some random dude walks up to you and starts like screaming at you about how horrible a person you are, how much they hate you, it doesn't make a lot of sense to really internalize the things that person is saying because they're a stranger, right? Your first reaction to that should be, who are you, right? Or maybe even get out of my face, right? It doesn't make a lot of rational sense when someone is going off and telling you how terrible you are. If you don't know who they are, you're not going to start going inward and questioning yourself, because that's coming from a source that's not rational, right? And in a lot of cases, anytime someone is that angry at you, there should be some separation, that there's a lot more going on with this person rather than me. So there was a lot of situations, work is tough sometimes, and sometimes work is tougher than others. And I went through a season, to use the biblical term, where work was extremely tough and people were going through some rather difficult things. Now, the panic that started at work branched out into every area of my life. And it's not 100% unheard of for my kids to elicit a panic attack from me, which is something that's really hard for me to deal with. Of all the things that I do with my particular experience with, malfunctioning mental health, the panic attack is embarrassing. It is humiliating. It feels really, really rough. There is a lot of stigma associated with this thing, and people look at you like you are legit crazy. And then there are times where people want to call an ambulance, and you're like, I don't need an ambulance. I'm just having a freak out right now, right? I'm trying to tell you, don't call an ambulance. This is America. I'm going to go bankrupt, right? Just even talking about this stuff is actually making me feel my pulse is racing right now. Even just talking about this in a way that I know other people potentially are listening. Now, before I get into the nit grit, where I want to share the stories that elicit the panic, I want to talk about some of the conversations I've had with people over the week, as I've been peppering Twitter with all sorts of questions about this stuff. The first interaction I had came from my buddy Daniel Roofman. He's a really cool guy. He's a really good writer. And for him, of course, one of the things that he recommends, and I've heard this a lot from friends and colleagues, is CBD oil. I know virtually nothing of CBD oil. And I'm starting to think that maybe I should give it a shot. From what I've been told, not just from him, but this is something I've been interested in the past. CBD oil is something you should kind of think about, like talking with your doctor about. Apparently, it is apparently a substance with some potential interactions. But man, this is another one of those comments that are going to be a little bit controversial sometimes. I really do sometimes feel like, personally, my life would be a lot easier if they would just legalize the wacky tobacco. I believe weed would probably be a huge balancer for me because of how quickly my panic gets out of control. Now, I don't really have a lot of evidence for that. It's just something that I would, I think about. So CBD oil, I might pick up some of that personally. That might be interesting to try. And when I do try it, I'll definitely discuss it here. That'll be fun to have that on a personal level. But again, like I've said before, I'm no clinician. I'm certainly no one you should take any advice on for this. But having my experience with it would be pretty interesting, right? And like I've heard before, I don't think CBD oil has a lot of physical effects on you. Anyway, it's more kind of like a supplement, right? I'm very much talking out of my butt, but that was something that Daniel recommended, something that he does. There was, let me get my names here, because I want to make sure I give credit to the people who talked about this. Amy Lynch Benique, I think. I know I'm probably very much butchering your name, which is just really unfortunate. I'm sorry. Amy Lynch talked about having, and I thought this was really interesting because it wasn't what I was looking for, but I think there might be a lot of wisdom to it. Amy, I didn't do my my t-shirt shout out for today. This is my John Cena versus The Fiend WrestleMania shirt given to me by my wife because she's awesome. Gosh, I think that was during the was that the pandemic that I don't even remember. Anyway, so for Amy, scheduling exercise and physical activity and making sure that's something that's a part of her every day, or at least part of her routine, is extremely important. That was something I never even thought about before. Like your routine, the physical activity of your routine, helping you manage panic attacks. The thing that I was wanting and I was thinking about is, what do you do when the panic attack starts? I never thought about preventative measures that you would do before the panic even sets in. That actually was very interesting to me. And as someone who has not exercised in a while because I'm a tub of goo, that's something I should probably start doing. Having a physical out, so even if it's not something that you're doing in the midst of a panic attack, that might be a place where you can go and deal with those emotions either before you run into them or, as they build up. Panic does have a tendency to sort of build up. You get sensitive to things. Like your ability to stand up to pressures and stress erodes if you're not taking proper care of your mental health. If you're pushing yourself too hard, if you're not giving yourself the proper kind of coping mechanisms, you become far more likely to have a panic attack. So Amy Lynch, her advice is probably extremely good, right? If you're doing the preventative measures and you're actually taking proper intermittent care of yourself, you're probably going to have a little bit more of that mental toughness in order to get through those things. And even if it doesn't outright prevent the panic attacks, I could see it even reducing how severe they are because you're in more control of your mental faculties. Now, there was one more, and I want to make sure I hit everyone who had hold on. I really want to make sure I hit everybody who... Oh, here we go. Now, this was interesting. This is... can't even see his username. Melman65 says that it's a difficult subject for him and that it seems to feed into PTSD. And PTSD, I've never been formally diagnosed with PTSD. I'm almost certain I have it or had it. I don't know. I really should probably try to get a formal diagnosis for it. I'll go into the circumstances for that in a minute. I know that we discussed it at one point, and psychological Psychological diagnoses are weird anyway. I know I've been diagnosed with ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, generalized anxiety disorder. So I've had this formal diagnoses, but I don't exactly have like a plaque that I can point to and be like, yup. But he seems to talk a lot about that physical activity. He also says throwing himself into a project. Now, one thing that I used to do was I used to paint Warhammer miniatures, Warhammer 40,000, the little mini Space Marines. And man, gluing a little miniature and painting it just because it's that attention to very small detail used to really help me a lot, because it was like all the other parts of my brain just shut off and I would be completely and totally dialed in to that small, minute task. So when Melman from Twitter, Melman65, brought up the projects that he would throw himself into, I was like, man, I need to drop some cash and get some more models to paint, because that really helped me for a time. Now, this has been the general discussion. These have been some of the things that I've heard and some of the things I've seen. Panic disorder is definitely out there, and it's something that people struggle with. So this is something I've thought about a lot, because I've really wanted, and the reason I came up with the name Performative Mental Health was to use the issues of my mental health as a kind of performance. And this might get kind of ugly, because when I talk about this, I get pretty upset. So I'm gonna have to kind of sort of zone in for this right now. But my panic disorder started with the issues at work, but it really got bad when I participated in a mandatory active shooter drill. And I participated in two of these things, and they were mandatory, right? Now, I'm actually like starting to get clammy. So when I tell this story, I try to emphasize the funny parts about it, because there's some pretty funny shit that went on during this, even though it's still something that kind of like haunts me in a lot of ways. So we had to participate in this thing, and this was not an active shooter drill like I had seen before. Before, active shooter drills were just turning the lights off and hiding, right? We actually had a guy come into the building with a shotgun with blanks in it and shoot the place up. We also had people there who were pretending to die in the halls. Oh my God. There was a mountain of sausage biscuits. It's just looking back on it, it's so insane. There was a mountain of sausage biscuits. Police were everywhere. And they were telling us what this was going to pertain to. We really didn't know what we were getting into when we showed up. And I'm just like, guys, I have anxiety disorder. This is not going to go well. And but there was nothing that could be done about it. Now, in one last act of personal defiance, I go up and I take an armful of the biscuits. And I just like look the guy in charge in the face, and I'm like, I just walk out my door with this armful of sausage biscuits. I go to the Coke machine and I get like a giant Diet Coke, and I run up to my office because I know that this is about to get bad. And I'm like, so long, suckers. So I run up the stairs and turn out the lights. I get under my desk. I'm seriously like 10 or 12 sausage biscuits. And I got my Diet Coke. I'm just waiting for the world to fall apart. And I'm in the dark, and I'm scarfing my face. And then the gunshots start. And people are screaming. And I'm in the dark. And it was like everything just sort of like just crunched in around me. And I was so hopelessly and totally alone. And I kept saying to myself, it's not real. It's not real. It's not real. But my body and my mind was encountering this simulation, and I could not stop the physical reactions of my body to it. I'm hyperventilating. I am clutching my biscuits. I'm trapped, right? And I hear people shouting. I hear people screaming. And every time the gun goes off, I'm just like, I never know when it's coming. And it's just, Sometimes when I'm in my office, I still hear gunshots, right? I still hear screams in my head. It's taken a lot of work. And it doesn't end there. Because then all of a sudden, one of these people are knocking at my door. They're knocking at my door and they're looking in my window. And I come up out from behind my desk and I see it's a woman. And she's like, please let me in. Please let me in. And you know what? That sucked. That really sucked. Because at that moment, I knew what I needed to do. I knew what I was supposed to do. I knew what I'd been trained to do. And me being a special forces English teacher or whatever you would call it, I needed to get my ass back under the desk and I needed to sit there and I needed to let whatever happened to her happen to her. That's what I was supposed to do, right? Well, I got out from behind my desk and I went up to the door. And just as I was about to let her in, the gunshot goes off and she falls to the floor. I know it's not real. I know it's not real. But I still see her fall through my window. And I'm like, and I just scramble back under my desk. And I'm sucking on my Coke bottle like it's something like a baby. I still see this. And then the guy's trying to get in my door. The actor, right? The guy with the gun is trying to get in my door. I'm just sitting under my desk. I'm sitting under my desk. And I can't hold back the tears, right? I know it's not real, but here's the other thing too. And this is one of the things I've never really talked about. I'm panicking at that point, not because this fake shooter is trying to, pretend to kill me. I'm panicking because I broke the rules. Because I didn't do what I was supposed to do, and I was afraid I was going to get in trouble for it. I broke the rules. I didn't want to get in trouble. I did not want to get in trouble. I didn't want them to yell at me. I didn't want them to be mad at me. I didn't want anyone to be. That was the last thing I needed at that point. And the police tackle the fake gunman right outside my door and go through the arrest procedures. And the whole time I'm hiding under my desk. I'm hiding under my desk and I'm afraid. Not because of the fake gunman, but I'm afraid I'm going to get in trouble because I tried to let the person into my office. For the longest time after this, I didn't know if the exercise was done yet. And so I hid. I hid under my desk because I was so afraid to come out. For so long, I didn't know if it was okay for us to come out. I couldn't figure out, is he still out there? Is someone out there that's waiting for me to come out because they're angry at me? Is somebody going to come and knock on my door? I'm just sitting under my desk in the darkness, trying to get it together. And when I finally come out, finally gather up the courage to come out, and I flip on the light, and I fall apart in the middle of the floor. I fall apart. I can't breathe. I got a pain in my chest. I feel like I'm having a heart attack. I have been trapped in this room, and I just don't know what to do with myself. And all my colleagues are right there. And they're all like, "Oh my God, David, are you all right? David, are you okay? Someone call the ambulance." Don't call the ambulance. I tell them, don't. I'm not having a heart attack. It feels like it, but I'm just having a panic attack. And I'm in this really awkward position where I'm having to calm down everybody else in the midst of my panic attack, right? I was familiar enough with the panic disorder that I had to get other people to stop panicking at my panic. I still have nightmares about this, and it still makes me incredibly emotional when I talk about it. It's been a lot of therapy. It's been a lot of time trying to put myself back together, and people still ask, "You know it wasn't real, right?" No. Really? My brain is not as healthy as yours. My brain does not understand and does not react to things in a healthy way sometimes. This was years ago, and I'm actually at a place where I can talk about this in a way that I won't completely lose it. I used to be really angry about it, but now I'm finally coming to an understanding about the fact that people didn't understand what this would do. People didn't understand that this was going to tear a hole in my head, that this was actually going to knock me down a few steps. They had no idea, right? I literally had to calm other people down in the midst of my own panic. That's a heck of a responsibility for someone, right? That's a hard thing. But it does kind of illustrate the point that part of the reason that this all happened in the first place because people didn't understand it. And I tried to say, you've got people here who have been in the military. You've got people here who could theoretically be suffering from PTSD. If someone has PTSD, you know what's the last thing they want? To be confined in a building with a gun going off. It doesn't matter if it's real or not. But the other thing that they probably never even really thought about was the fact that you could create new cases of PTSD. You could actually leave someone with a brand new case of PTSD because their brains couldn't handle the stimuli that you forced upon them. This is a very, very emotional conversation for me, and it's a difficult one, but I feel like it needs to come out and it needs to be said. We need to be heard. And someone once asked me, well, what are you going to do if there ever is an active shooting? And my response was, I'll probably just die, right? I mean, theoretically, how much control do we all have over ourselves in any situation? But the other thing is I'm a Buddhist, right? One of the most important things for my particular version of Buddhism is to create for yourself a particular calming, accepting emotional status during death. Because that's like one of the times when we get very rooted to samsara, to karma. And so if that happens and it looks really bad for me, A, it might be better for me to take a bullet than one of my students. B, I might just sit down and start meditating because that's a really good way to go, right? To reduce the emotion that's wrapped around you at any given point. I don't know. In any case, panic's real, and it has real effects on people in the everyday world that so many people don't see. And it's definitely the most challenging part of my own mental health, right? The biggest struggle that I have is when my brain locks up and my body won't do what I tell it to because I'm so panicked. I don't know what to do in a situation like that. I still don't. I'm still looking for a solution. So in any case, it's been a good episode, very cathartic. I feel good. And I hope you guys all have an excellent, restful, and contemplative weekend. Thank you very much, those of you who were here watching this stream, watching me have my own little mini freak out there for a minute. I'm anxious to see what kind of discussion this takes. That's panic, though. That's actually very, very muted panic. Very, very muted. It's more, it's just kind of emotional. But in any case, I'm going to let it stand. It is what it is. Thank you guys very much. And I hope you all have excellent rest of your days.